While I was starting a new life out in Zurich, Switzerland, my parents moved my brother into my penthouse without knowing I had just sold it to a ruthless commercial real estate attorney. Then the SWAT team revealed the truth. The scream hit my phone with such violence that for a split second, I thought someone might be dying. Lincoln. They are breaking down the doors. There are men with tactical rifles in the living room. The voice of my brother, Chase, cracked through the speaker in pure, uncontrolled panic. I did not stand up. I did not drop my phone. My heart did not race, and my stomach did not churn. I simply sat in a quiet, rustic coffee shop in downtown Zurich. I lifted my dark roast espresso and watched the heavy snow falling over the historic town square outside. I was frozen, but not from fear. I was frozen by recognition. I knew exactly what Chase had done. More importantly, I knew exactly who had helped him do it. Lincoln, are you listening to me? He screamed. Armed police are here. They have laser sights on my chest. Call the building manager and tell him to call them off. Tell them I am your brother. He was hyperventilating. Yet, he still sounded absolutely certain that I would stop everything, fly across the world, and rescue him from the consequences of his own choices. That had always been my role in our family. I fixed the disasters, absorbed the cost, and protected Chase. But sitting in that snowy Swiss cafe, I realized his panic no longer held any power over me. Who gave you the spare key, Chase? I asked. My voice was flat, stripped of any warmth. I am a senior cybersecurity architect for a Fortune 500 tech firm. I rarely ask a question unless I already know the answer. There was a brief silence on the line, the kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they have walked into a trap but still blindly believes they can talk their way out of it. Mom and Dad gave me the emergency key, he muttered. His terror instantly hardened into entitlement. They said it was fine. You live in Switzerland now. You are not even using the place. Just call the manager and tell them I have permission. He had used the spare key to bypass the first layer of security and had moved himself and his luggage into what he believed was my Manhattan penthouse. In his mind, my home was not private property. It was a family asset, a luxury safety net built with my salary and available whenever he needed it. My parents had not just crossed another boundary. This time, they had detonated something they did not understand. They thought they were moving pieces around in my life without my consent, just as they had done for decades. They had no idea I had already cleared the board. I said, "What do you mean you cannot? It is your penthouse." A loud crash exploded in the background. I heard heavy tactical boots pounding against the hardwood floor, then a commanding voice ordering him to get on the ground. I did not respond as a deep, unfamiliar peace washed over me. No, it is not. I ended the call. What Chase did not know was that the luxury Tribeca penthouse where he was currently being handcuffed had not belonged to me for exactly 28 days. I had sold it to a ruthless commercial real estate attorney and handed the new owner full administrative access to the high-tech security system. My family thought they were stealing space from the reliable son who always forgave them. Instead, they had forced their golden boy into the den of a predator. To understand why I allowed my own brother to walk straight into a felony breaking and entering charge, you have to understand the source code of my childhood. When people ask me where I am from, I usually say Boston. The most honest answer is that I grew up inside a machine designed to extract resources from one son to guarantee the comfort of the other. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, ran our family like a corrupt corporation. Chase was the visionary, the golden investment, the fragile genius who supposedly just needed a little more time and financial backing before he finally blossomed. I was the infrastructure. Quiet, strong, reliable, and expected to keep everything running without ever asking for recognition. If Chase was the prodigy destined to change the world, I was the proof that a child could survive on emotional neglect and table scraps. My clearest memory of that system came when I was 16. 14-year-old Chase stole a box of industrial road flares from a construction site because he thought lighting one in our suburban backyard would be fun. The moment it ignited, he panicked and dropped it. The flare rolled under the wooden fence and right into our neighbor's detached garage, setting it on fire. The fire department arrived. The local police arrived. Chase stood on the soggy lawn, sobbing hysterically while red and blue lights flashed across our house. Richard never yelled at him. Instead, my father dragged me into the kitchen and slapped me hard across the face. "Why were you not watching him, Lincoln?" Before I could even process the absolute injustice, he was already building the lie. "When the police knock on that door, you are going to tell them you dropped the flare." "I did not do it," I whispered, my cheek burning. Richard leaned in, his eyes completely void of anything paternal. Chase has a fragile record. He is sensitive. A police charge could ruin his future. You are tough, Lincoln. You are a rock. You can absorb the impact. I had already been trained to obey that twisted logic. When the furious neighbor and a police officer walked up our driveway, I stepped forward. I looked the officer in the eye and confessed to a crime I had never committed. My parents did not defend me. They rewarded my sacrifice by withholding my punishment. Taking responsibility builds character, Richard declared later. You did your job today. Absorbing the blame for Chase did not build my character. It built a pattern that followed me straight into adulthood. I became the family human firewall, designed to catch every mistake, debt, lie, and disaster that Chase downloaded into our lives. I took the damage so the rest of the system could keep functioning. But firewalls do not have feelings in the minds of the people who use them. They do not need rest, and they do not need protection. They block, attack after attack, until they fail. My family never noticed how close I was to a total system shutdown. By the time we reached college, the difference between us was treated like a law of nature. I chose computer science and data architecture because it was brutally hard, highly valuable, and offered a clear path to financial independence. Richard and Eleanor made it clear they would not contribute a single dime to my education. Hard work builds a solid foundation, Richard said while completely dismissing my international tuition bills. So I worked my way through Zurich in Switzerland. I spent my nights working as a security guard. I repaired laptops for other students in my dorm and scrubbed pots at a crowded diner on the weekends. I trained my mind and body to function under an exhaustion so profound that every day felt like walking underwater. Chase lived in an entirely different universe. My parents paid for private Ivy League tutors, luxury off-campus apartments, spring break vacations to Cabo, and an endless chain of fresh starts. He bounced from a prestigious business school program to a liberal arts college for art history, dropping classes the second they demanded any sustained effort. He called himself a tech startup founder, but his only proven talent was burning through Richard's money. Every failure became evidence of his special nature. Eleanor insisted that the corporate world simply did not understand his creative brilliance. The contrast reached its peak when I graduated a year early at the top of my class with highest honors. There was no celebratory dinner. Eleanor did not even attend. Richard came to the commencement ceremony but spent most of the time staring at his smartphone. When I walked off the stage holding the diploma I had worked myself sick to earn, he met me in the parking lot. "Congratulations," he said, already walking toward his SUV. "The main server at my office is down. Come over tonight and rebuild the network. Do not make any other plans." 3 days later, Chase announced he was dropping out of yet another degree program because the professors were toxic. My parents responded by buying him a candy apple red Ford Mustang GT. Eleanor posted pictures on social media praising his brave resilience. I saw that post while eating cup noodles in my cramped studio apartment. That image clarified my exact place in the family hierarchy. I was a low-risk asset, a machine that processed stress and produced results. My competence was not loved, it was exploited. The more capable I became, the more helpless they allowed Chase to remain. The only person who consistently treated me like a human being was my grandpa Walter. He bought me my first desktop computer. He actually listened when I spoke. He respected my intellect without trying to convert it into free labor. His passing became the first major turning point in my life. He died quietly during a brutal nor'easter winter storm. His final warning to me was simple: never let them rewrite your source code. My family barely gave me time to grieve. Immediately after the burial service, Eleanor pulled me aside near his gravesite and demanded I co-sign a $50,000 loan to cover a massive cryptocurrency debt Chase had racked up. She looked at me standing next to the casket of the only person who had truly loved me and saw nothing but an available line of credit. I refused. That was the day a part of me finally disconnected. Though the complete break would come later, years passed. I built a highly lucrative career. I became a senior cybersecurity architect and started traveling across the country. I also purchased an expensive, ultra-secure smart penthouse in the Tribeca neighborhood of New York City. I believed that geographical distance and extreme financial success would create a wall my family could not scale. I was wrong. They did not view my success as a boundary. They viewed it as a major software upgrade for their personal bank. The final breaking point arrived disguised as a Sunday family dinner. Richard and Eleanor insisted I come to their Boston suburb home for a home-cooked meal before my upcoming long-term tech project in Switzerland. The house smelled exactly as it always did: a mix of pine sol and overcooked meatloaf. Chase was already sitting at the dining table, aggressively scrolling on his latest iPhone and sighing loudly enough to ensure everyone understood he was suffering. Halfway through the meal, Richard cleared his throat. "Your brother has been hitting a rough patch lately," he began with fake casualness. "His landlord is not going to renew his lease, and the venture capital market is impossible to crack right now." I continued cutting my meat because I already knew exactly where this conversation was heading. Eleanor leaned over the table and used the soft, honeyed voice she strictly reserved for manipulation. "Honey, we know you are going to be out in Zurich for your new project. Your Manhattan penthouse is massive and will just be gathering dust. We decided it makes perfect sense for Chase to move in for the next 3 years, just until his tech startup gets off the ground. He needs a prestigious address where he can host angel investors." I placed my knife and fork down. The metallic clink echoed in the sudden silence. 3 years? I asked. "Yes," she said, acting as if the decision was already finalized. "My penthouse is my private home. The security system is tied directly to my biometric data." The answer is absolutely not. Richard slammed his fist on the dining table. "Do not use that disrespectful tone with your mother. You have more money than you know what to do with, while your own brother is about to sleep on our couch. You are behaving like a selfish, ungrateful child." I looked at Chase. He did not even look up. He simply smirked, completely confident that our parents would bulldoze right through my boundaries just as they always had. "I will not give my home to Chase," I stated. "I bought it. I pay the property taxes. He is 30 years old. He can go get a job." Eleanor gasped, and the tears arrived with almost theatrical speed. "It is empty space, Lincoln. You are choosing drywall and glass over your own flesh and blood. How can you be so heartless?" I stood up and walked out the front door without saying another word. Within 10 minutes, my phone began flooding with vicious text messages from my Aunt Patricia, calling me arrogant, cruel, and a sociopathic robot. For most of my life, that kind of language would have triggered an intense wave of guilt. Sitting alone in my car that night, I felt something entirely different. A beautiful, clean, but terrifying sense of absolute emptiness. They viewed me as nothing more than a server built to host their corrupted data. It was time for a complete system wipe. When I returned to my Tribeca penthouse, I walked past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the New York City skyline and went straight into my home office. I did not turn on the television, and I did not pour myself a drink. I booted up my workstation, opened an encrypted spreadsheet, and began a forensic audit of my own family. Over the next 12 hours, I did exactly what Fortune 500 companies paid me to do with complex networks. I followed the hidden data trail. I pulled up 10 years of bank records, credit card histories, tax documents, and archived emails. I created specific columns for the date, the dollar amount, the recipient, the stated purpose, and the actual purpose. The penthouse remained completely silent except for the rapid clicking of my mechanical keyboard. I documented every temporary loan Richard had requested for his logistics firm that he had never bothered to repay. I logged every overdraft fee and emergency bill of Chase's that I had discreetly covered to save him from eviction or legal trouble. I added up the family cellular plan I had solely paid for over an entire decade. I found medical receipts for Eleanor's supposed health emergencies that had somehow perfectly aligned with luxury spa weekend getaways in the Hamptons. I treated my entire life like a digital crime scene and refused to let emotion distort the hard data. By 6 in the morning, the Manhattan skyline was glowing with a bruised purple sunrise. My eyes were burning, but my mind was incredibly clear. I highlighted the final column and calculated the grand total. The number flashed in bold red font across my monitor. $218,400. That was the highly measurable price of my family's love over 10 years. It was not a string of bad luck or a few isolated emergencies. It was a systematic extraction of my cash, my labor, my time, and my sanity. I stared at the total and understood that simply refusing future requests would never be enough. They would constantly continue testing every digital door and exploiting every emotional weakness. A parasite does not stop feeding just because the host asks nicely. The entire environment had to vanish. I saved the file under a single name, the ledger. Next, I opened my corporate email. My employer had repeatedly offered me a permanent relocation package to head our European division out in Switzerland. I typed out a one-sentence acceptance and agreed to start in exactly 30 days. My next message went to a man named Victor Thorne. Victor was a notoriously aggressive commercial real estate attorney who bought prime properties with liquid cash, often to restructure them or flip them to massive corporate buyers. He operated strictly through ironclad contracts and showed absolutely zero hesitation when it came to evicting trespassers or tenants who violated agreements. I offered him my penthouse through a discreet, immediate cash sale at a 20% discount. He replied within the hour. We met on the 42nd floor of a sleek glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. His office was specifically designed to intimidate. There were no family photographs or sentimental decorations, just perfectly organized legal briefs and a massive mahogany desk. Victor looked like a great white shark, wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit. I slid the valuation file across the desk. I am leaving the East Coast in 10 days, I said. I need an off-market cash sale. No public listing, no contingencies. A rapid closing. Sold exactly as is. He reviewed the market valuation and the interior photographs without asking why I was moving so aggressively fast. Men like him cared about leverage, not emotional backstories. I can wire the funds in 7 business days, he replied. For an expedited sale with zero contingencies, I am taking 20% off the market value. Agreed. Only then did he look up. A faint smirk appeared on his face. You are running from something very complicated, Lincoln. I am not running, I told him. I am executing a controlled demolition of my own infrastructure before I hand over the site. The transaction moved with brutal corporate efficiency. In 7 days, the funds hit my investment accounts, and the deed was legally transferred over to Victor. I negotiated a brief leaseback agreement that allowed my modern furniture to remain inside until my flight departed. To anyone watching from the outside, absolutely nothing looked different. The automated lights still turned on at dusk. The smart blinds opened and closed on their programmed schedule, but the property was no longer mine. During my final nights in New York, I systematically dismantled the invisible financial network that kept my family comfortable. I canceled every single automatic transfer, terminated the shared cellular plan, deleted the backup funding from the bank accounts tied to Chase, and permanently closed every avenue they had ever used to access my wealth. Then I completed the most important technical step. The penthouse contained high-definition security cameras, biometric access controls, and cloud-based monitoring. I transferred the permanent administrative access over to Victor and sent him an unalterable digital link to the interior video feeds and the secondary retinal scanners. The property is officially yours, I typed. You now have real-time access to all security systems. If anyone enters after my departure, prosecute them to the absolute fullest extent of the law. I will not intervene. I did not plant any fake evidence, nor did I lure anyone in with a false promise. I simply packed my belongings. I left the old spare emergency key exactly where I knew Eleanor had hidden it in her suburban kitchen drawer, and I boarded my flight to Switzerland. All I did was step out of the way and allow them to act on their deep-rooted belief that whatever belonged to me automatically belonged to them. 5 days after arriving in Zurich, I received the final confirmation that I had made the correct choice. I was sitting in a temporary corporate housing unit reviewing international tax documents when a red banking alert flashed on my screen. A charge of $4,200 had cleared on a secondary credit card at a luxury casino resort on the Las Vegas Strip. I did not feel an explosive rage. A cold, surgical focus took over. I logged into the account. Chase had not stolen the physical plastic card. He had used the saved credit card details on his laptop from 3 years prior, back when I had paid for his emergency dental surgery. He had booked a VIP weekend suite to impress his supposed tech startup friends. He did this because he genuinely did not believe there was any meaningful separation between my money and his desires. I called Eleanor. "Lincoln," she answered cheerfully. "Honey, we were just talking about you. Your father wants to know if you can remotely patch his company email server. Chase just charged over $4,000 to my credit card for a luxury vacation in Las Vegas." A short pause followed, just long enough for her defensive mechanisms to boot up. "Oh, honey, do not be so dramatic," she sighed. "You know your brother has been battling depression lately. His angel investors backed out, and he really needed a mental health break to clear his head. He stole my financial information. He committed credit card fraud. He borrowed it," she snapped. "He said he would pay you back right after his next round of seed funding. You make hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can easily afford it. Why do you always have to make everything so incredibly difficult for this family?" She was actively defending a felony while casting me as the aggressor. "I see," I said. "Just let it go, Lincoln. Do not destroy the peace of this family over a few pennies. Tomorrow we are moving his belongings into your penthouse, so he has a stable place to stay when he flies back." "I am not destroying anything," I replied. "I am just collecting the data." I ended the call, reported the casino charges as blatant fraud, initiated a corporate chargeback, and canceled the card permanently. I knew exactly what would follow. Chase would attempt to check out of his luxury suite. The payment method would violently decline. Hotel security would detain him, and he would desperately call Richard to bail him out. The sudden, intense financial pressure would push my parents to accelerate their master plan to house him in my former property. They would march right into Victor's legally owned real estate armed with a stolen key and absolute arrogance. Everything happened exactly as projected. Richard had to drain his logistics company's emergency payroll reserve just to get Chase out of the casino's legal threats. Humiliated, totally broke, and desperate, Chase flew back to the East Coast under Eleanor's strict instruction to hunker down in my penthouse until the situation blew over. They fully believed I was out in Switzerland, completely oblivious and still paying the massive overhead for a home that no longer belonged to me. Later, Victor forwarded me the building security logs, the video files, and the official police reports. Together, they showcased a spectacular sequence of arrogant mistakes. Chase arrived at the luxury Tribeca high-rise with 3 massive suitcases. He completely avoided the front desk concierge, Marcus, by sneaking in through the residential parking garage. Using the spare key Eleanor had hoarded, he unlocked the private resident elevator that led directly to the top floor. He stepped out, fully expecting the penthouse door to simply yield to him. But Victor was absolutely obsessed with security protocol. The physical deadbolt was only the first layer. He had installed a military-grade retinal scanner right on the main entry panel. Chase arrogantly assumed the software was malfunctioning. He punched in my old numeric passcodes repeatedly. When those failed, he flew into a violent rage. He pulled a heavy steel fire extinguisher from the hallway emergency cabinet and ruthlessly smashed the biometric panel into pieces. That was his fatal error. The shattered scanner did not trigger a loud, echoing alarm. It instantly transmitted a silent, high-priority distress signal directly to the building's private security firm and the local NYPD precinct. Marcus received the flashing red alert on his master tablet. He knew the property was now legally owned by Victor, who had explicitly demanded a zero-tolerance policy for any unauthorized entry, so he immediately authorized a tactical police response. At that exact moment, I was sitting in a snowy cafe in Zurich watching the winter weather. My smartphone began vibrating on the rustic wooden table. Chase's scream blasted into my ear. "Lincoln, they are breaking down the doors. There are men with tactical rifles in the living room." I listened quietly while I sipped my dark espresso. The contrast between the peaceful, snowy street outside and the absolute chaos unfolding inside Victor's penthouse felt almost surreal. Chase begged me to call Marcus. He begged me to tell the armed police officers that he had legal permission to be there. Even with tactical rifles aimed directly at him, he still blindly believed my authority could magically erase what he had done. When he finally admitted our parents had given him the spare key, I told him the undeniable truth. "I cannot help you, Chase. It is not my penthouse." Through the phone speaker, I heard a heavy combat boot stomp against the hardwood and the sharp metallic click of police handcuffs. "You are under arrest for felony breaking and entering and the malicious destruction of private property," a commanding officer announced. Chase dropped the phone. "Lincoln, please," he screamed as they forcefully dragged him away. For the very first time in my entire life, the human firewall remained completely disconnected. The damage finally reached the people who had actually caused it. 3 weeks passed. I finalized my permanent residency documents in Switzerland and completely ignored the absolute avalanche of frantic voicemails, emails, and vicious accusations pouring in from the East Coast. Chase spent 2 miserable nights in a holding cell before Richard scraped together enough cash for his bail bond, but the severe felony charges remained fully active. Victor aggressively rejected every proposed plea deal and legally demanded the maximum consequences allowed by state law. I eventually had to fly back to New York one final time to officially close out my remaining East Coast corporate accounts. Aunt Patricia's daughter worked for the corporate travel agency utilized by my employer. She illegally accessed my flight itinerary and gave my family the exact time of my arrival. My airplane touched down on a foggy afternoon at JFK Airport. I walked out of Terminal 4's secure zone, rolling a single silver carry-on bag, and spotted them waiting aggressively near the baggage claim area. Richard, Eleanor, and Chase stood shoulder to shoulder like a tribunal preparing to hand down my sentence. Chase looked pale, completely unshaven, and entirely stripped of his usual arrogant confidence. I could have easily turned around and walked away, but running away was never the actual purpose of what I had done. I tightened my grip on my suitcase handle and walked directly toward them. Richard stepped forward first. Lincoln, we need to talk right now. Eleanor aggressively moved to his side. We are not going to let you get on another airplane and abandon this family after what you did to your own flesh and blood. I stopped several feet away. What exactly do you think I owe you? I asked. Eleanor recoiled as if I had physically slapped her. You owe us an explanation. You got the police involved over a simple misunderstanding. Richard pointed a stern finger at my chest. You set a trap for your own brother. You are going to call the new owner of that penthouse and make him drop these charges. I did not set a trap, I stated clearly. Your son forced his way into a private residence that did not belong to him. He made a minor mistake, Richard spit back. You turned it into a massive catastrophe. You are his older brother. You were supposed to protect him. I am not his moral compass, and I am no longer his financial safety net. Chase glared at me with pure hatred. You could have just told us you sold the place, you psychopath. You did not have to blindside me and have a tactical SWAT team arrest me. I repeatedly told all of you that I required boundaries. You actively chose to ignore them. You used my credit card in Las Vegas. You attacked a biometric scanner with a heavy fire extinguisher. Those were your conscious decisions. I opened my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, professionally bound folder. You want an explanation? Here it is. This is a 10-year forensic audit of my entire relationship with this family. I call it the ledger. I flipped the folder open. Every single page contained meticulously organized spreadsheets, bank statements, corporate emails, and printed receipts. I did not raise my voice. I simply began reading the hard numbers in a calm, steady tone that echoed through the busy airport terminal. 3 years ago, $4,000 paid to a local auto body shop after Chase drove drunk and wrapped his car around a light pole. 5 years ago, $18,000 wired directly to the IRS to cover your severe tax penalties, Richard. 7 years ago, $22,000 in back rent to prevent Chase from being legally evicted from 4 separate luxury apartments. I firmly closed the folder. The grand total is $218,400. That is the exact price of your parenting. I am not the villain here. I am just the only investor who finally accepted that the company was bankrupt and completely liquidated his shares. We are your parents, Eleanor whispered, her face completely draining of color. You owe us your life. You treated me like a host, I said. You were parasites. The host has permanently shut down. Before she could launch into another theatrical performance of tears, a sharp, authoritative voice sliced through the heavy tension right behind us. Lincoln! I turned around. Victor Thorne was striding purposefully through the airport terminal in a sharp charcoal suit carrying a leather briefcase. His expression held a mixture of faint amusement and total, undeniable authority. Richard recognized him instantly. His logistics firm had spent the last 6 months aggressively competing for a massive supply chain contract with Victor's commercial real estate group. My father's righteous anger instantly vanished beneath a desperate, fake smile. Mr. Thorne, what an unexpected surprise. I have left several messages with your office regarding our supply chain proposal. Victor raised a single hand, instantly silencing him. Richard, I am not here to speak with you. He turned his attention to me. Lincoln, do you have a brief moment to review the final divestment paperwork before you leave? We stepped slightly to the side, and he clicked open his briefcase. I brought the finalized police reports and the time-stamped security logs of the violent incident at my property, he said, speaking loudly enough to ensure my family heard every single word. Eleanor stared at him in sheer horror. You filed the police report against our son. Victor turned and faced her slowly. Your son forcefully broke into a highly secure private residence and physically destroyed a biometric scanner. Yes, I filed the report. I am the legal owner of that penthouse, and I am aggressively pursuing felony breaking and entering charges to the absolute maximum extent allowed by law. Chase cowardly shrank back behind Richard. My father raised both of his hands in a pathetic gesture of surrender. Mr. Thorne, please, we can resolve this quietly. We will gladly pay for all the property damage. This has absolutely nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with business, Victor stated coldly. He then looked at me with genuine professional respect. He handled the real estate sale quietly, legally, and with total professionalism. He turned his piercing gaze back to Richard. As for your logistics proposal, my firm strictly requires partners with impeccable ethical standards. Given the documented criminal conduct within your immediate family, your corporate bid is officially rejected. Your company will never receive a single contract from my enterprise group. Richard's shoulders completely collapsed. In a matter of seconds, he understood the full scope of the devastation. He had just permanently lost the largest potential client his company had ever pursued. His golden son was facing severe felony charges. The reliable son who had secretly funded their entire existence was leaving the country forever. "Lincoln, please," he begged, for the very first time. His voice sounded remarkably weak and hollow. "We need your help. If I lose this major account, my entire company might collapse." I looked at the three of them one final time. "I am not going to save you. You built your survival on my back. Now you are going to have to learn how to stand on your own." I walked away toward the security checkpoint and did not look back. 6 months later, Richard's logistics company rapidly downsized, failed entirely, and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The emergency reserve money that Eleanor had always claimed did not exist completely vanished into exorbitant legal fees for Chase. He barely managed to avoid a lengthy state prison sentence through a desperate plea deal, but he was strictly ordered to pay massive financial restitution. The last I heard of him, he was working graveyard shifts, cleaning a run-down gas station because, for the very first time in his sheltered life, nobody else was picking up his tab. My mornings out in Zurich now belong entirely to me. I am no longer family infrastructure. I am no longer a shield, a backup bank account, or a human firewall. I am the man who audited his own life, uncovered a toxic deficit, and ruthlessly reduced the balance to absolute zero. Quiet revenge is not always a loud, dramatic scream. Sometimes, it is simply the sound of a heavy door locking firmly behind you, followed by the strength to ensure it stays locked forever.